They thought the highest rank in the building belonged to the badge on his chest. 20 minutes later, every person inside that station would discover they had been saluting the wrong kind of authority. The main hallway of the Brookhaven Police Department stood perfectly still beneath the bright morning sunlight pouring through tall glass windows. Uniformed officers lined both sides of the polished floor, while city officials gathered quietly near the entrance. Every conversation had faded into silence. At the center of the hallway stood a black woman with calm eyes and an unmistakable sense of quiet confidence. She wore a tailored navy business suit instead of a police uniform and held a worn leather portfolio against her side. Her expression revealed neither pride nor satisfaction. It reflected only humility and steady composure. Police Chief Richard Lawson stood one step behind her with the mayor beside him. Around them, every officer stood at attention. Officer Daniel Brooks remained frozen near the front of the formation, his face unusually pale beneath the fluorescent lights. His breathing had become shallow. His hands remained perfectly still at his sides. Less than half an hour earlier, he had looked directly into the same woman's eyes and believed she was lying about who she was. Now the entire department waited for her first words as its new police captain. Daniel could not force himself to look anywhere except the floor. His mind replayed every decision he had made that morning with painful clarity. Every question, every assumption, every confident conclusion. None of them had prepared him for this moment. The woman slowly looked across the hallway, meeting the eyes of officers one by one. There was no anger on her face, no desire to embarrass anyone, only the quiet presence of someone who understood that leadership began long before a title appeared on an office door. Chief Lawson stepped forward and cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "it is my honor to introduce the newest police captain of the Brookhaven Police Department." Daniel closed his eyes for the briefest moment. He already knew the words that would follow. They echoed inside his mind long before anyone else heard them spoken aloud. Captain Vanessa Carter. The name landed inside the room with remarkable calm, yet it carried more weight than any shouted command ever could. Every officer raised a respectful salute toward the woman standing at the center of the hallway. Daniel slowly lifted his own hand, but it felt heavier than anything he had ever carried during his years in uniform. Across from him, Captain Vanessa Carter acknowledged the salute with a gracious nod rather than triumph. She neither smiled nor celebrated. She simply accepted the respect offered to the office she had earned through decades of honorable service. A reporter standing quietly near the entrance whispered to another member of the local press, asking why one officer appeared completely shaken while everyone else looked proud. No one answered because almost no one knew what had happened before sunrise. They saw only the ceremony. They did not know the story hidden behind the silence. They did not know that the woman now being welcomed as the department's highest-ranking officer had spent part of her first morning sitting inside one of the station's interview rooms because someone believed she did not belong there. Vanessa gently adjusted the leather portfolio in her hands. Inside rested appointment documents signed by the mayor, official departmental orders, and the notes she had prepared for her first address to the officers she would soon lead. None of those pages mentioned the unexpected lesson that had already unfolded before she even entered her office. She glanced once toward Daniel. Their eyes met for only a second. There was no accusation in her expression, no resentment, only a calm reminder that every decision made by someone wearing a badge leaves a lasting impression on another human being. The silence inside the hallway seemed almost impossible to bear. Then, as though time itself decided everyone had waited long enough, the memory carried the story backward. 20 minutes earlier, Captain Vanessa Carter had been nothing more than an unfamiliar woman walking toward the front entrance of the police department, and Officer Daniel Brooks had already decided exactly who he believed she was. The morning air carried the crisp freshness of early autumn as Captain Vanessa Carter walked steadily along the sidewalk leading toward the Brookhaven Police Department. The city had only begun to awaken. Coffee shops welcomed their first customers. School buses rolled quietly through nearby neighborhoods. American flags hanging outside government buildings moved gently in the cool breeze. Vanessa glanced briefly at her watch. She was 20 minutes early, exactly as she had planned. During 27 years in law enforcement, she had learned that arriving early was one of the simplest ways to show respect for the people she served. She carried only a weathered leather portfolio containing her official appointment papers, departmental transition documents, and the speech she had prepared for the officers she would soon lead. There was nothing about her appearance that demanded attention. She wore a tailored navy business suit, practical shoes, and a calm expression that reflected confidence without arrogance. Long before earning the opportunity to become police captain, she had promised herself that every new assignment would begin with humility instead of ceremony. She wanted her first impression to come from her character rather than her title. As she approached the front entrance, a patrol vehicle slowly turned into the parking lot. Officer Daniel Brooks noticed the unfamiliar woman walking toward the secured employee entrance. He had never seen her before. His attention immediately focused on the leather portfolio and the purposeful way she carried herself. Something about the situation made him uneasy, although he could not explain exactly why. He stepped out of the patrol vehicle and adjusted the radio attached to his uniform before walking toward her with measured confidence. "Good morning, ma'am," he said in a professional tone. "May I ask where you are headed today?" Vanessa stopped immediately and offered a polite smile. "Good morning, officer. I am heading inside." Daniel glanced toward the secured entrance. "Are you an employee here?" "Beginning today, yes," Vanessa answered calmly. Daniel studied her for another moment. "May I see some identification?" Without hesitation, Vanessa opened her portfolio and removed her driver's license along with a sealed appointment envelope bearing the city's official seal. Daniel examined the driver's license first. The name read Vanessa Carter. The address belonged to another county several hours away. He looked at the sealed envelope but did not open it. "What position are you starting today?" he asked. Vanessa answered with complete honesty. "Police captain." Daniel almost smiled. To him, the answer sounded impossible. He knew a new captain had been hired after a nationwide search, but no official photographs had yet circulated through the patrol division. He assumed the new captain would arrive with city officials, senior command staff, or a formal escort. Certainly not alone carrying a leather portfolio. "Ma'am," Daniel said carefully, "I believe there may be some misunderstanding." Vanessa remained composed. "There is no misunderstanding from my perspective." Daniel folded his arms. "Our new police captain is expected this morning." Vanessa nodded once. "That is correct. And you are saying that person is you?" "Yes." The answer came without hesitation, without defensiveness, and without the slightest trace of pride. Daniel looked again at the identification in his hand. Nothing appeared fraudulent, yet nothing confirmed her claim through the local system available from his patrol tablet. He requested a quick verification. The computer returned only limited information because her employment records had not yet synchronized with the department database. Daniel frowned slightly. The incomplete response strengthened his doubts instead of resolving them. Vanessa noticed his concern and spoke with gentle patience. Administrative systems often require time to update when someone transfers between agencies. Daniel nodded politely, but suspicion continued to grow inside him. Experience had taught him that unusual situations deserved additional attention. He believed he was following proper procedure. Vanessa quietly accepted that belief without argument. She understood that first impressions often shaped difficult moments. Looking toward the station entrance only a few yards away, she realized her first day would not begin the way she had imagined. Even so, she remained perfectly calm because she believed the truth never needed to rush. It only needed the opportunity to arrive. Daniel Brooks took one slow breath before handing Vanessa Carter her identification back. Everything about the encounter felt unusual, yet nothing he had seen gave him absolute certainty. The city appointment envelope remained sealed. The computer system still showed no local employment record. His training reminded him that assumptions could be dangerous, but so could overlooking something important. "Ma'am," he said respectfully, "I am going to ask you to step inside while we verify a few details." Vanessa accepted the request with remarkable calm. "If that is what you believe is appropriate, officer, I will cooperate." Daniel nodded and held the secure entrance door open. As they walked through the lobby, several officers passed by without paying much attention. They assumed Vanessa was a visitor meeting with someone inside the building. None of them recognized the woman whose office upstairs had already been prepared with a new nameplate waiting behind a closed door. The front desk clerk smiled politely. "Good morning, Daniel. Everything all right?" "Just verifying some information," Daniel replied. The clerk returned to answering telephone calls, never realizing that the quiet woman standing a few feet away had been hired to become one of the department's highest-ranking leaders. Daniel guided Vanessa toward a small interview room used for administrative conversations rather than criminal investigations. The room contained a simple table for chairs and a large window looking into the hallway. There were no raised voices, no hostility, and no sense of urgency. Daniel simply believed additional verification was necessary before allowing someone unrestricted access to the secure portions of the building. "Please have a seat," he said. Vanessa thanked him and sat comfortably, placing her weathered leather portfolio on the table beside her. She folded her hands and waited with complete patience. Daniel remained standing for a moment before taking the chair across from her. "I appreciate your cooperation," he said. "I know this may seem inconvenient." Vanessa smiled gently. Leadership often begins with patience during inconvenient moments. Daniel noticed the confidence in her answer. It did not sound rehearsed or defensive. It sounded like something learned through many years of experience. "How long have you worked in law enforcement?" he asked. 27 years. "Where was your previous assignment?" "The Hamilton County Police Department." Daniel entered the information into the department computer. A few moments later, the statewide database confirmed her previous employment. Her service record appeared impressive. Commendations, leadership assignments, community policing awards, instructor certifications. Everything looked authentic. Yet the transfer into Brookhaven still had not appeared inside the local personnel system. Daniel leaned back thoughtfully. The information reduced some of his concerns, but created new questions. If she truly possessed this level of experience, why had no one informed patrol officers what their new captain looked like? Vanessa quietly watched him work without interruption. She understood exactly what he was experiencing. In every organization, technology sometimes moved more slowly than people. She also understood something Daniel did not yet realize. Every decision he made during the next few minutes would become part of the first impression between a future captain and one of the officers under her command. Outside the interview room, morning activity continued throughout the station. Detectives carried case files down the hallway. Dispatchers coordinated routine service calls. Supervisors prepared shift briefings. Upstairs, administrative assistants arranged folders neatly inside the office reserved for the incoming captain. Fresh coffee sat waiting on a side table. A small welcome card signed by department employees rested beside the desk. No one upstairs knew that the person they were preparing to welcome was quietly sitting downstairs only a short distance away. Daniel picked up the appointment envelope once more. The official city seal looked genuine, but department policy discouraged opening sealed government correspondence addressed to someone else without authorization. He placed it back on the table. "I am going to make a few more calls," he explained. "Until then, I would appreciate it if you remained here." Vanessa nodded without hesitation. Of course. As Daniel walked toward the hallway, he believed he was simply completing another routine verification. He had no idea that every minute passing inside that quiet interview room was bringing the entire department one step closer to a moment that none of them would ever forget. Daniel Brooks stepped into the hallway carrying a growing sense of uncertainty that he could not explain. Everything he had verified suggested that Vanessa Carter was exactly who she claimed to be, yet the one system he trusted most remained incomplete. He walked directly to the administrative office where Sergeant Emily Foster was reviewing the morning schedule. "Have you heard anything about our new captain arriving?" Daniel asked. Emily looked up from her computer. "Only that the ceremony starts at 9 o'clock sharp. Human Resources said someone from City Hall would escort her inside." Daniel frowned slightly. "Do we have a photograph?" Emily shook her head. "Not yet. The personnel file has not finished syncing into the local network." Daniel thanked her and continued toward dispatch, convinced that one more verification would settle everything. Meanwhile, upstairs, the conference room overlooking the city square had been carefully prepared for the welcoming ceremony. Fresh coffee filled the room with a warm aroma. A small American flag stood beside the department flag near the podium. A polished brass nameplate rested on the front row reading simply, "Captain Vanessa Carter." Police Chief Richard Lawson glanced at the large wall clock for what felt like the 10th time in only a few minutes. "Has anyone heard from Captain Carter?" he asked his executive assistant. She checked her tablet before answering. "No, Chief. Her flight arrived yesterday evening. and the city vehicle confirmed she declined an escort because she wanted to arrive on her own. Richard nodded slowly. That answer matched everything he had learned about her during the hiring process. Vanessa Carter had built a reputation for quiet professionalism rather than public attention. She preferred listening before speaking and observing before making decisions. Still, she was never late. Not once in 27 years. The mayor entered the conference room carrying a folder containing the official oath of office. "Is our new captain here?" he asked with a friendly smile. Richard looked toward the empty chair reserved at the front of the room. "Not yet." The mayor glanced at his watch. "That is unlike someone with her record." Richard agreed without saying another word. Downstairs, Daniel contacted the county personnel office responsible for employment transfers. After several minutes, the representative confirmed that Vanessa Carter had indeed completed every required certification before transferring into Brookhaven. However, because the appointment officially became effective that morning, portions of the digital record would not appear in the local department database until later that day. Daniel thanked the representative, but the answer still left one important question unresolved. If everything was legitimate, why had no one from command notified patrol officers that the incoming captain might arrive alone before the ceremony? He returned toward the interview room, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. Through the window, he saw Vanessa sitting exactly where he had left her. She was reading a small notebook from inside her leather portfolio, occasionally making a handwritten note in neat, careful script. She did not appear frustrated. She did not appear impatient. She simply looked like someone making productive use of unexpected time. Daniel entered the room and placed 1 cup on the table. "I thought you might like some coffee." Vanessa smiled warmly. "Thank you, Officer Brooks. That is very thoughtful." Daniel sat across from her again. "I apologize that this is taking longer than expected." Vanessa wrapped both hands around the warm cup before answering. The measure of professionalism is rarely found when everything goes according to plan. It appears when circumstances become inconvenient. Daniel reflected quietly on her words. They reminded him of advice once given by his academy instructor many years earlier. Outside the room, the station continued moving through another ordinary morning, unaware that 2 completely different timelines were quietly approaching the same destination. Upstairs, an empty chair waited for a respected leader. Downstairs, that same leader waited patiently in a simple interview room, while every passing minute drew the entire department closer to a truth that would soon transform an ordinary welcome ceremony into a lesson no one present would ever forget. The wall clock inside the Brookhaven Police Department quietly moved closer to 9 o'clock, and with every passing minute 2 completely different stories continued unfolding beneath the same roof. Upstairs, the conference room had filled with command staff, city officials, and community leaders who had gathered to welcome the department's newest police captain. Downstairs, Vanessa Carter remained seated in the interview room with remarkable patience, her untouched coffee slowly cooling beside the weathered leather portfolio resting on the table. She occasionally glanced toward the hallway outside the glass window, not with frustration but with quiet curiosity. She had spent nearly 3 decades solving difficult situations by remaining calm, while others hurried toward conclusions. This morning, she saw no reason to abandon that principle simply because she had unexpectedly become part of the situation herself. Police Chief Richard Lawson checked his watch once again before turning toward his executive assistant. "Please call Captain Carter's cell phone," he said. She immediately placed the call, but after several rings the voicemail answered. She looked back at Richard with growing concern. "No answer, Chief." Richard frowned. That was unlike everything he had learned about Vanessa during the hiring process. She had earned a reputation throughout the state for reliability, professionalism, and respect for every commitment she made. Missing the first ceremony of her own appointment simply did not fit the woman described by every reference who had spoken on her behalf. The mayor quietly approached Richard. Could there have been a traffic delay? Richard considered the possibility before slowly shaking his head. Perhaps, but she would have called. He reached into his pocket and removed his own phone. This time he contacted Human Resources. "Has anyone heard from Captain Carter this morning?" After a brief pause, the answer came back exactly the same. No contact, no updates, no explanation. Richard thanked the administrator and ended the call. The atmosphere inside the conference room shifted almost immediately. Conversations that had been cheerful only minutes earlier became noticeably quieter. Staff members exchanged uncertain glances while wondering what could have delayed someone known for exceptional discipline. Downstairs, Daniel Brooks continued making careful inquiries without realizing the concerns spreading through the building above him. He contacted the city employment office one final time, hoping someone could verify exactly when the new captain had been scheduled to arrive. The representative reviewed the appointment records before answering. According to our file, Captain Vanessa Carter intended to arrive approximately 20 minutes before the ceremony, so she could introduce herself informally before the official welcome. Daniel thanked the representative and slowly lowered the telephone receiver. 20 minutes early. He looked through the interview room window toward Vanessa. She had arrived almost exactly 20 minutes before the ceremony. The coincidence lingered in his mind longer than he expected. At the same moment, Vanessa noticed a young patrol officer walking past the room, carrying several welcome folders decorated with the department seal. One folder briefly slipped from his hands before another officer helped him gather the papers. Across the top of the first page, she recognized the title welcoming the department's new police captain. She smiled almost imperceptibly before looking back toward the table. The irony of the moment was impossible to ignore, yet she remained completely silent. She believed there would be an appropriate time for explanations, and this was not yet that time. Upstairs, Richard Lawson made a decision. Contact building security, he instructed. Review every entrance camera beginning 30 minutes before the scheduled ceremony. If Captain Carter entered this building, I want to know exactly where she went. The request immediately set several administrative employees into motion. Within minutes, security personnel began reviewing surveillance footage from the main entrance. None of them realized that the answer they were searching for had never actually disappeared. It had simply been redirected by a well-intentioned officer acting on incomplete information. Daniel remained standing outside the interview room, replaying every conversation he had shared with Vanessa since she arrived. Her confidence had never sounded rehearsed. Her patience had never appeared forced. Most importantly, she had never once tried to use authority, status, or emotion to influence his decisions. Instead, she had answered every question with honesty, dignity, and respect. For the first time that morning, Daniel felt something he had not allowed himself to feel before. It was not certainty. It was not fear. It was the quiet realization that if he had misunderstood the situation, the consequences would reach far beyond an ordinary administrative mistake. And somewhere else inside the building, people were already beginning to search for the woman who had never truly gone missing. The security office occupied a quiet corner on the second floor, far from the growing concern spreading through the conference room. Two civilian security specialists carefully reviewed the surveillance recordings from every entrance into the Brookhaven Police Department. The digital clock on the monitor displayed exactly 8:38 in the morning when a woman wearing a navy business suit appeared on the main entrance camera carrying a weathered leather portfolio. "There she is," one specialist said. "That matches the description from Human Resources." Police Chief Richard Lawson stepped closer to the screen without saying a word. The recording showed Vanessa Carter walking confidently toward the entrance before Officer Daniel Brooks approached her outside the building. Richard watched the conversation unfold in complete silence. There was no confrontation, no raised voices, only a professional exchange between an officer performing what he believed to be his duty and a woman answering every question with remarkable patience. The recording continued as Daniel escorted Vanessa through the secured entrance instead of allowing her to proceed toward the administrative offices upstairs. Richard felt his expression change. "Keep playing," he said quietly. They watched Daniel guide Vanessa into one of the administrative interview rooms. Several minutes later, Daniel exited alone carrying her identification and continued making telephone calls throughout the station. Vanessa never attempted to leave the room. She never argued. She simply waited. The security specialist slowly turned toward Richard. "Chief, she has been inside the building this entire time." Richard took one slow breath before reaching for the telephone on the security desk. "Dispatch," he said after the line connected. "Please locate Officer Daniel Brooks immediately and ask him to remain where he is. Also notify Captain Carter that I will be with her in just a moment." There was a brief pause before the dispatcher answered with understandable confusion. "Chief, Captain Carter is already here." Richard looked once more at the surveillance monitor. Yes, he replied calmly. She has been here all morning. Downstairs, the dispatcher contacted Daniel through his portable radio. Officer Brooks, please remain near interview room 2. Police Chief Lawson is on his way. Daniel acknowledged the message without concern. He assumed the chief had finally received the confirmation he had been waiting for. He glanced through the interview room window. Vanessa looked up from the notebook resting beside her coffee and offered the same calm smile she had worn since arriving. Daniel opened the door. The chief is coming down to speak with us. Vanessa nodded gently. Thank you for letting me know. Daniel sat across from her once more. I hope we can finally resolve this. Vanessa folded her notebook, closed before answering. I believe we are about to. Outside the room, officers continued their morning routines, unaware that an extraordinary moment was only seconds away. Several supervisors noticed Chief Lawson walking quickly through the hallway with the mayor close behind him. Their expressions were serious but controlled. Administrative employees quietly stepped aside as the two leaders approached interview room 2. Daniel heard the footsteps before he saw them. He stood immediately as the chief reached the doorway. Richard Lawson looked first at Daniel, then through the glass toward Vanessa Carter. The moment his eyes met hers, his expression softened with unmistakable recognition. Without hesitation, he opened the interview room door himself. Captain Carter, he said with sincere respect, I owe you my deepest apology. We have been looking for you everywhere. Daniel felt every thought inside his mind stop at once. He slowly turned toward the woman he had questioned for nearly an hour. Vanessa rose calmly from her chair, picked up her weathered leather portfolio, and smiled with the same quiet dignity she had shown since the beginning of the morning. Good morning, Chief Lawson, she replied. It appears my first day has been more memorable than any of us expected. The hallway outside the room fell completely silent as nearby officers looked toward the doorway, trying to understand why the police chief himself had just addressed the quiet visitor with the title that instantly explained everything Daniel Brooks had failed to recognize until that very moment. For several long seconds, no one inside the hallway spoke. The ordinary sounds of telephones, keyboards, and quiet conversations seemed to disappear beneath a silence that carried far more weight than any command ever could. Officer Daniel Brooks remained standing beside the interview room table, unable to process what he had just heard. The woman he had questioned with complete confidence was not simply a visitor or a new employee. She was Captain Vanessa Carter, the leader the entire department had been preparing to welcome that very morning. Police Chief Richard Lawson stepped fully into the room and extended his hand. Vanessa accepted it with a warm, professional smile. Welcome to Brookhaven, Richard said sincerely. I am deeply sorry that your first morning unfolded this way. Vanessa shook his hand without hesitation. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate your kindness. There was no trace of resentment in her voice. No attempt to embarrass anyone standing nearby. Her calm composure only made the moment more powerful. Daniel looked down at the floor, replaying every decision he had made since seeing her walk toward the front entrance. He remembered asking for identification. He remembered doubting her explanation. He remembered escorting her into the interview room because the computer system had not yet reflected her appointment. At every step he had believed he was protecting the department. Yet standing before him was undeniable proof that good intentions alone could never replace sound judgment. Officers slowly gathered in the hallway outside the room, drawn by the unusual sight of the police chief personally greeting someone from inside an interview room. Curious whispers quietly spread from one end of the corridor to the other. Several employees noticed the leather portfolio resting on the table beside the official appointment envelope that had remained sealed throughout the entire morning. Richard carefully picked up the envelope and smiled with quiet disbelief. This should have been opened upstairs during your welcome ceremony, he said gently. Vanessa nodded. Instead, it became part of an unexpected lesson. Richard looked toward Daniel before speaking again. Officer Brooks has always tried to take his responsibilities seriously. Vanessa followed Richard's glance. Daniel finally raised his eyes, his expression filled not with fear, but with genuine regret. Before anyone else could say another word, he spoke quietly. Captain Carter, I owe you an apology. The hallway became completely still once again. Daniel continued carefully, choosing every word with obvious sincerity. I believed I was following procedure. But somewhere along the way, I stopped listening closely enough to the person standing in front of me. I questioned your credibility before I fully considered the possibility that my assumptions could be wrong. I am truly sorry for the way your first morning began. Vanessa listened without interrupting. When Daniel finished, she allowed a brief silence before responding. Officer Brooks, every leader eventually faces a moment that reveals more about character than experience ever can. Daniel looked at her attentively. Today will not define you because you made a mistake, she continued calmly. It will define you by what you choose to learn from it. Those words settled over everyone listening. Several veteran officers quietly lowered their eyes, recognizing that they themselves had probably made similar assumptions during their own careers. Vanessa reached for her leather portfolio and held it comfortably at her side. You treated me respectfully throughout our conversation, she continued. You never raised your voice. You never forgot your professionalism. What happened today was not caused by courtesy. It was caused by conclusions formed before all the facts had arrived. Daniel nodded slowly. He understood exactly what she meant. Richard Lawson glanced toward the growing crowd gathered outside the interview room. Everyone is waiting upstairs, he said softly. Vanessa smiled. Then perhaps we should not keep them waiting any longer. As they stepped into the hallway together, conversations immediately stopped. Officers instinctively straightened their uniforms. Administrative staff quietly moved aside. The mayor approached with an expression that combined relief and admiration. One by one, the people lining the corridor understood exactly who had been sitting inside the interview room throughout the entire morning. Daniel remained a single step behind the group, watching Captain Vanessa Carter walk toward the staircase with quiet confidence, never seeking recognition, never demanding respect, and somehow earning more of it with every step she took than any title alone could have ever provided. As Captain Vanessa Carter reached the top of the staircase beside Police Chief Richard Lawson, every conversation inside the conference room came to an immediate stop. City officials, command staff, detectives, patrol officers, and civilian employees all turned toward the entrance at the same moment. The empty chair that had been waiting for her was finally occupied, but the unexpected delay had already transformed an ordinary welcoming ceremony into something far more meaningful. Chief Lawson stepped to the podium and allowed a brief silence to settle across the room before speaking. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, our new police captain has already demonstrated the very qualities that made her the unanimous choice for this position. Before many of us even realized she had arrived, she gave this department an opportunity to remember why professionalism and humility matter every single day. He looked toward Vanessa with genuine respect before stepping aside. The mayor approached, read the official oath of office, and moments later Captain Vanessa Carter formally accepted her appointment as the newest leader of the Brookhaven Police Department. Warm applause filled the room, but Vanessa noticed something different from celebration alone. She saw reflection. She saw thoughtful expressions. She saw experienced officers quietly reconsidering moments from their own careers. When the applause gradually faded, Vanessa walked to the podium carrying only her weathered leather portfolio. She placed it gently on the podium before looking across the room. Her eyes moved slowly from one face to another, never rushing, never overlooking anyone standing before her. Thank you, she began softly. I prepared a speech for this morning. It is still inside this portfolio. However, I believe the department has already written a better one. A few quiet smiles appeared throughout the audience. Vanessa continued. When I accepted this position, I expected my first day to begin with introductions, handshakes, and a welcome meeting. Instead, it began with questions. Honest questions, careful procedures, delayed confirmations. It was certainly unexpected, but it also reminded me of something I learned many years ago. She paused briefly. The most important decision an officer makes is rarely whether to enforce the law. It is deciding whether we truly understand the person standing in front of us before reaching conclusions. The room became completely silent once again. Daniel Brooks remained near the back of the conference room, listening without lifting his eyes from the floor. Vanessa noticed him but never singled him out. Every person who walks through the doors of a police department carries a story we cannot immediately see, she continued. Some arrive frightened. Some arrive hopeful. Some arrive searching for help. Others may one day become your coworkers, your supervisors, or your closest partners. Regardless of who they are, Every one of them deserves the same dignity from the very first conversation. Several officers slowly nodded in agreement. Vanessa rested one hand lightly on the leather portfolio before speaking again. Respect cannot depend on rank. It cannot depend on appearance. It cannot depend on assumptions. If respect only appears after someone proves their importance, then it is not truly respect. It is simply recognition. Those words settled deeply throughout the room. Even the reporters quietly taking notes lowered their pens for a moment, recognizing the significance of what they had just heard. Vanessa smiled warmly before continuing. Officer Brooks apologized to me a few minutes ago. I accepted that apology because I believe character is measured by the willingness to learn rather than the fear of making mistakes. None of us will serve this community perfectly. I certainly will not. But together we can promise something better. We can promise to listen longer, observe more carefully, and remember that every interaction reflects not only on ourselves, but on the badge we wear. She looked once toward the American flag standing beside the department flag before finishing her remarks. Leadership is not about reminding people who is in charge. Leadership is about making sure every person who enters this building leaves believing they were treated fairly, honestly, and with dignity. That will be the standard for this department beginning today. The room erupted into sustained applause, not because of the title Vanessa now carried, but because every person present understood they had just witnessed the beginning of a culture built not upon authority alone, but upon humility, accountability, and the simple decision to see every individual as a human being first. 6 months later, the Brookhaven Police Department felt different in ways that could not be measured by statistics alone. The hallways remained just as busy, patrol cars still rolled through neighborhoods every hour of the day, and dispatch radios continued carrying the steady rhythm of public service. Yet there was a noticeable change in the conversations between officers and the people they served. More questions were asked before conclusions were reached. More time was taken to listen before decisions were made. The transformation had not happened because of a new policy manual or a mandatory training session. It had begun with one unexpected morning that no one inside the department had forgotten. Captain Vanessa Carter never mentioned that first day unless someone else asked about it. She believed the purpose of leadership was not to preserve uncomfortable memories, but to build better habits from them. Instead of allowing the incident to become a source of embarrassment, she quietly incorporated its lesson into every leadership meeting, every academy orientation, and every conversation with newly assigned officers. Her message never changed. Every person deserves dignity before they earn your trust, because dignity is not a reward. It is the foundation of professional service. Officer Daniel Brooks carried that lesson with him every day he put on his uniform. The experience had challenged his confidence, but it had also strengthened his character. Rather than hiding from what had happened, he accepted responsibility for it and worked deliberately to become the kind of officer who never allowed assumptions to replace careful observation. His fellow officers noticed the difference long before he did. He listened longer during community calls. He spoke more patiently with nervous citizens. He encouraged younger officers to slow down whenever uncertainty appeared. One crisp autumn morning, Daniel stood in front of a group of newly graduated patrol officers beginning their field training. Captain Carter had asked him to lead the first orientation discussion, a decision that surprised many people until they understood her reason. Daniel looked across the room at the eager faces preparing to begin their careers. Some appeared confident. Others looked understandably nervous. He recognized both expressions because he had once worn them himself. He rested one hand on the podium before speaking. You will spend countless hours learning procedures, policies, and laws, he began. All of those things matter. But there is one lesson you will not find written inside any handbook. The room became completely quiet. Never decide who someone is before giving them the opportunity to tell you their story. Several recruits immediately wrote the sentence into their notebooks. Daniel smiled gently. One day you will meet someone who challenges your expectations. When that moment comes, remember that professionalism begins with curiosity instead of certainty. Standing quietly near the back of the room, Captain Vanessa Carter listened without interrupting. She did not step forward to explain why those words mattered. She did not need to. The sincerity in Daniel's voice already carried the lesson more effectively than any speech ever could. After the orientation ended, The new officers gathered their materials and slowly left the room. Daniel noticed Vanessa waiting by the doorway. He approached with an appreciative smile. "Thank you for trusting me with that responsibility," he said. Vanessa returned the smile. Trust grows when people choose to learn from difficult moments instead of hiding from them. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "I still think about that first morning." Vanessa looked through the large front windows where patrol officers greeted community members entering the building. "So do I," she admitted. "Not because I remember the mistake, but because I remember what happened afterward." They stood together in comfortable silence as another citizen walked through the department entrance and was welcomed with a warm greeting from the front desk. It was a simple moment, almost ordinary, yet both of them recognized its significance. Culture changes one conversation at a time, one decision at a time, and one act of respect at a time. As the morning sunlight filled the lobby once again, the Brookhaven Police Department continued serving its community with a renewed understanding that authority may open doors, but character determines what people remember after they walk through them. Because in the end, the strongest badge is never the one worn on a uniform. It is the quiet integrity carried within the person wearing it.